And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio, the show designed to generate thought through entertainment. Join us as we explore the strange and unexplained, the unanswered and the unbelievable on Odd Reality Radio.
An error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
Welcome to Odd Reality Radio. I'm Ty West, and today we take an equally respectful and curious look at the phenomena known as Skinwalkers. What are they, and where did they come from? But first, let's take care of some news. Have you heard of the latest growing trend in the bizarre world of cosmetic surgery? I'm talking about limb lengthening. The procedure is generally viewed as a godsend for people whose short stature affects their lives and psychological well-being, as the operation can add a good 2 or 3 inches to their height, but they do come at a cost. Not only are they ridiculously expensive, but they also involve having your legs broken. That sounds ridiculous. I'm slightly under average height. I'm about 5'8" on a good day, and I honestly don't think that even if I was 4'8", that this would be something of any sort of interest to me. These painful surgeries were once reserved for people with dwarfism or children with uneven limb length, which obviously there was a reason to begin with, but now it seems men and women with below average height, they're willing to brave this torment for purely cosmetic reasons. The arduous and prolonged procedure begins with a doctor breaking the patient's shin bones and inserting a telescopic rod into them. Now, I work in medical manufacturing and specifically implants. This is not going to feel good whatsoever. Over time, as these bones heal, the rod pulls the bones apart gradually, approximately 1 millimeter per day. As the bone is stretched, new bone, nerves, arteries, and skin grow to fill the gap. The process is complete in about 3 months' time, adding 2 or 3 inches overall. After this, the patient would need several months of physical therapy to recover completely. I honestly can't think of any good reason to do this other than to have your uneven limb length straightened out. But even then, I'd probably just suffer through a hobble. As long as it wasn't super painful, I think I'd take my chances. But I don't know, cosmetic surgery is just something that we live in such a superficial age. People just love themselves, but more importantly, being noticed by other people and being told about themselves. It's not my cup of tea. Let's just say that. But something that is more my style lately has been the teachings of Buddha, and the simplicity of these teachings. I've been able to apply them to areas of my life, and it's helped me see the world that I assumed I knew predictably well in a brand new spectrum, a whole new color of passion and interest in things that I just otherwise overlooked, and the little things to simplify it. And another thing that I'm really interested in within Buddhism is meditation. Now, the monk in this next story, he really took it to the next level. A mummified monk found preserved in Mongolia last week has been baffling and astounding those who uncovered him. Senior Buddhists say the monk found sitting in the lotus position is in a deep meditative trance and not dead. Forensic examinations are underway on the remains, found wrapped in cattle skins in north-central Mongolia. Scientists have yet to determine how the monk is so well preserved, though some think it's Mongolia's cold weather that could be the reason. But Dr. Barry Curzon, a physician to the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, he told the Siberian Times that the monk was in a rare state of meditation called Tukdam. And, quote, if the meditator can continue to stay in this meditative state, he can become a Buddha, Dr. Curzon said. The monk was discovered after being stolen by a man hoping to sell him on the black market. Now, I don't know what a monk mummy goes for, especially one in the lotus position. I'm sure that's a rare one. But Mongolian police have arrested the culprit, and the monk is now being guarded at the National Center of Forensic Expertise. And all jokes aside, this is a pretty incredible thing. I suggest you check out the pictures. I'll include it in the show notes, of course. And take a look at these photos. This guy, from behind, he looks like he could just turn around and wink at you. And if he did, it'd probably be the last thing you'd ever want to see, because you wouldn't sleep after you saw it, I'm sure. Now, to add a little more nightmare fuel to the already sleepless fire, let's dip into a few stories about skinwalkers. Stay tuned. You're listening to Odd Reality Radio. They are accounts of nighttime drives on the lonely road between Farmington, New Mexico and the Four Corners, when in the distance ahead, a coyote appears on the roadway, its eyes glowing in the headlights, except that they are not coyote eyes. They are something else, something almost human. And when the car speeds past the waiting coyote, the coyote bolts and begins speeding along with it, running at 60 miles per hour, its eyes still aglow in the headlights. The driver looks away and presses the pedal to the metal, and when he looks back, suddenly it is no longer a coyote running at pace next to the vehicle, but a man with the yellow eyes of a coyote fixed on the driver, one hand banging on the hood. Or another story from the desert town of Tuba City, near Monument Valley, Arizona, where a building contractor is doing repairs on an old ranch home. Thinking himself alone, the man is surprised to hear laughter coming from somewhere off in the sheep pens. Following the noise, the man turns a corner to the edge of the sheep pen where, before him, the entire flock is huddled, shivering in one end of the pen, while on the other end, a lone ram stands separated. He is standing upright, his two front hooves across his chest, and his horned head thrown back in a gleeful, maniacal laughter that is unmistakably human. Watching this, the man jumps, and suddenly the ram spots him. And for a fleeting moment, the two lock eyes, and just like the laughter, the ram's eyes are familiar and anything but animal. The ram falls back down to all fours and begins to mill along as if nothing ever happened. These are just a couple tales of interactions with the supernatural enigma known as the Skinwalker. But to appropriately tell the history of the Skinwalker, we should start with shamanism. And a friend of mine actually suggested that I look into shamanism after mentioning my interest in skinwalkers. He's actually a part of an awesome podcast himself called It Just Is. Sean and Shep do an awesome job on the show with the It Just Is podcast, and you can find out more information at their website. It's itjustismedia.net. Thanks again, Shep. Now, the word shaman comes from Siberia. The word has been thrown around rather loosely over time to describe all types of spiritual leaders that don't necessarily practice a mainstream institutionalized religion. For example, people who have been considered a sorcerer, a medicine man or a woman, witch doctor, or even a magician have been all considered shamans somewhat in different parts of the world, depending on obviously their practices. I don't think David Copperfield necessarily was a shaman, but shamanism did exist during the Paleolithic era, which was approximately 50,000 to 30,000 BC in North Asia and somewhere around 25,000 BC in Europe. And these are merely just the earliest documented occurrences, and it may actually date back even further than that. And that comes from the EasternHealingArts.com website. Additional sources claim that the first known use of shamanism was during the 15th century, when the term saman was first documented in Siberia, which is derived from Sumerian's sham-an. Sham meaning eagle or vehicle of flight, and an meaning heaven or celestial. So, a celestial eagle, or eagle of heaven, if you will. And from the Arctic Sea to the Amazon jungles and across Asia, shamanism is found all over the world. In the early 20th century, prehistoric cave paintings were discovered in the south of France that depicted half-man and half-animal figures that archaeologists believe could have been depictions of shaman, which has led to speculation that shamanism may be the primordial human religion. Only a few hundred of the paintings found in France were ever shown, while around 20,000 have been published out of the former Soviet Union. But as far as the most Western culture's research of shamanism, we didn't really begin exploring shamanism with serious interest until around the 1950s and 1960s, when explorers began conducting research expeditions in Siberia to learn about shamanic culture and their practices, because shamanism is still practiced in Siberia today. Now, there were differing opinions on what the role of the shaman was in the Native American culture, and one was that the shaman is roughly the equivalent to a medicine man, a spiritual and ritualistic healer with the power to travel between the two worlds being the living and the spirit world. On the other side of the coin, some natives say that shamanism is not a Native American thing at all, and in fact, it is seen as an insult to have a medicine man or woman referred to as a shaman. The definition of shaman is actually someone who is believed in some cultures to be able to use magic to cure people who are sick or to control future events, where the definition of a medicine man is more specifically a person in a Native American culture who is believed to have magical powers that can cure illness and keep away evil spirits. These two definitions are from the Merriam-Webster, but these two definitions are from Merriam-Webster. The role of the shaman in the Native American cultures, in my opinion, appears to be one of spirituality, medicine, and education and feeding of the soul specifically. They kind of specialize in the soul. They are the experts of the soul. And as long as humans have been around, the soul has always been rather responsive to the light and the dark. Now here's where shamanism and skinwalkers actually begin to have similarities. The motives are completely opposite, don't get me wrong. Shamanism has a more positive and lighthearted thing, where skinwalkers now, I guess, have shifted at least into a more commonly negative connotation. And although the legend of the Skinwalker is shared by most Native American tribes, it's not always referred to as a Skinwalker. Although the stories of the Skinwalker vary slightly throughout, there is always one very common thread through every single one of them, and that is evil. Where the shaman seeks to nurture and enhance the soul, the skinwalker, like I said, it seeks to control and destroy it almost. Skinwalkers are unlike shamans in that they are motivated mostly by evil. Most often skinwalkers are male, but there have been stories of women who have also taken the life of their own children and offspring in order to become skinwalkers. In most versions of the legend, though, the skinwalker can take the form of any animal it possesses the pelt of, and most commonly has been seen as a wolf, a coyote, a cougar, a fox, or even an owl, which is the reason why the pelts of these animals are widely restricted in the native cultures. Now, there are multiple legends behind the origin of the Navajo skinwalker, and one claims Navajos mastered shapeshifting in order to escape persecution and relocation of the Kit Carson era. Now, for those of you who don't know, Kit Carson is somewhat the grandfather of reservations here in America, so that's kind of a clever way for somebody to escape persecution, is to shapeshift into an animal and, get you and your family to do exactly that, to get away if somebody encroached on your area. Now, that's a terrible way to live, if you ask me, to be running away and to shapeshift to get away, and maybe that's one of the reasons that they kind of soured over time or are seen as negative entities over time, is they've been kind of banished from society thanks to that lifestyle, and over time it grew as far as American culture and that influence. Another version relates to the Navajo belief in the Anasazi curse, and the Anasazi were actually responsible for the prevailing witchcraft in the Navajo tribes, and the Navajo skinwalkers used these off-limit Anasazi ruins and grave sites to gain certain powers. But the most prominent history of the skinwalker tells of a particular form of Navajo witch, or a specific witch called a Yi Nataloshi, translated to mean "with it he goes on all fours." Now, the Yi Nataloshi is usually a medicine man or high-ranking priest who has obtained supernatural powers through breaking a cultural taboo, including murder, seduction, or the corrupting of a family member. Once upon accepting this deep and consuming level of witchcraft, skinwalkers are banished forever from a tribe. But considering the foreknowledge of this, as well as the despicable acts required for the transformation, the aspiring skinwalker surely possessed an early preset hate for the tribe. In animal form, the eyes of a skinwalker are distinctly human, while in human form this is reversed. Varying versions of the legend attribute skinwalkers the ability to body snatch, or to take possession of another person's body if that person locks eyes long enough with the skinwalker. It is also said skinwalkers, through this same eye-locking method, have the power to read human thoughts or even mimic perfectly the voice of that person, a ploy used to lure relatives. Skinwalkers are also said to use voodoo-like tactics to manipulate their victims, such as collecting the target's hair, wrapping it around a pottery shard, and then burying it in a tarantula hole. And I don't know what the hell the significance of that is, but it doesn't sound like any sort of good. Outcasts and pariahs, skinwalkers assume begrudged and hate-driven existences. Their spirits, in a constant search of revenge or else mindless harm, the more modest accounts of skinwalker encounters portray them as mischievous and almost poltergeist-like. They will climb the roofs of sleeping families, bang on the walls, and knock on the windows. More commonly, though, skinwalker stories are far more malicious. In these accounts, skinwalkers climb the roofs in order to seek ways into the house and attack the family, or else they assault cars driving through the reservation land, causing wrecks. Now, an interesting note, it says certain Navajo myths insist that the only way to fully kill a skinwalker is with a bullet dipped in white ash. Now, that's an interesting way to go about it. It's not your traditional silver like you would deal with a werewolf or, in some cases, a vampire, with the garlic or a stake to the heart. It's an interesting theory, and somewhat modern if you think about it, because natives have been around longer than firearms, so I wonder what if anything was used previous to a bullet. These skinwalkers, they sound like they're a type of a paranormal super creature almost. They're definitely equally fascinating and frightening. And coming up next, we have tales from the infamous Skinwalker Ranch. That's right, stay tuned. You're listening to Odd Reality Radio. Interest in skinwalkers has grown significantly in recent years due to, in my opinion, the phenomena surrounding the Skinwalker Ranch in Duchesne, Utah. Now, for those of you who have not heard of the stories of the Sherman Ranch, I've actually found the original article written by Zach Van Eck in the Deseret News in 1996. For more than a year now, the Sherman's 480-acre ranch, just south of Fort Duchesne in Uintah County, has been a hotbed for UFOs and bizarre paranormal activity. Weirdness that even the Shermans who've witnessed the strange happenings with their own eyes and video camera have trouble accepting as reality. For a long time, we wondered what we were seeing, if it was something to do with a top-secret project, said Terry Sherman, who reluctantly agreed to speak publicly about the activity for the first time. I don't really know what to think about it. The Shermans, their teenage son, and 10-year-old daughter have seen 3 specific types of UFOs repeatedly during the past 15 months. A small box-like craft with a white light, a 40-foot-long object, and a huge ship the size of several football fields. They've seen other airborne lights, some of which have emerged from orange circular doorways that seem to appear in midair. They've videotaped 2 of the sightings. They've included mystery circles. They once discovered 3 circles of flattened grass about 8 feet across in triangular patterns about 30 feet from each other. In a nearby pasture, other strange soil impressions had been found. Circles about 3 feet wide and a foot or 2 deep in the dirt with the center perfectly flattened. One of the flying lights followed Gwen's car on her way home from work one night, and while in one of the fields with the family dogs, Terry heard male voices speaking an unfamiliar language. The voices seemed to be about 25 feet above him, but Terry couldn't see a thing. The dogs were frantic. They barked and growled before running off to the ranch house, Terry said. The Shermans have linked the sightings with the death or disappearance of 7 of their cows. 4 have disappeared without a trace. 3 others have been found dead and partially mutilated. We've seen the UFOs enough, and we know pretty much what the craft look like. And I think it's definitely associated with the cattle mutilations. When we see the crafts and then the cattle, we have problems, Sherman said. You talk to a lot of people around here that one time or another you have something they can't explain. There's been a lot of cattle mutilations, and a lot of them weren't reported. Several ranchers told me that when they had mutilations, they called the authorities, and the authorities couldn't do anything. So it's just a waste of time and effort. Indeed, the records clerk of the Uintah County Sheriff's Department said that her department had not received reports of UFO or cattle mutilations in recent memory. Sheriff Ralph Stansfield in nearby Duchesne County said that he is unaware of any UFOs or mutilations being reported in the past 18 months. Although the Shermans haven't told officials about cattle mutilations or UFO activity, they have confided in Joseph Jr. Hicks, a retired junior high school teacher from Roosevelt who has investigated more than 400 UFO sightings in the Uintah Basin since the early 1950s. Reports of UFOs during that time have numbered in the thousands, according to Hicks, and some have been associated with the cattle mutilations. Over the years, Hicks said at least half a dozen eyewitnesses have told him that they saw living beings in the windows or portholes of the UFOs. To Hicks, the Sherman sightings are extraordinary for their number, duration, and quality. But what they have witnessed is hardly unusual for the Uintah Basin, he said. I'd estimate over 10% of the population in the Uintah Basin has seen something, Hicks said. I think what's happening is we're being visited from beings from another world or some other place. I think primarily it's research and exploration. The Shermans' ranch would be a paradise if they were UFO researchers, but the strange lights in the sky weren't what the couple were looking for when they bought the ranch 2 years ago. They wanted a quiet place where they could get away from it all. Gwen, a Uintah Basin native, and Terry, who moved here from Arizona when he was 17, had no idea what they were in for. The ranch sat idle for 7 years after the previous owners had passed away, and it took a while for the Shermans to remodel the old house and move in. Before they took up residence, Terry noticed one of the strange circular depressions in the pasture west of the house. He assumed someone had removed an old tree. In April of 1995, the family got a taste of what was to come. Terry stepped out of the house to check on a cow that was calving in the field south of the house when he noticed lights in the field. He assumed they belonged to a recreational vehicle, maybe kids from neighboring farm riding four-wheelers. That didn't make a lot of sense, though, because the ranch is isolated 3 miles from the main road, and access is cut off by a creek and a huge rock ridge. It went clear down here, just above where this cow's mutilated, Sherman said, pointing out where that first UFO was seen. It went over some poplar trees there that are probably 40 to 50 feet tall. That's the first time we realized it wasn't an ATV. Gwen didn't see the object at the time, but had a sighting of her own later. It looked like headlights, but they were a little ways away from the craft, and there was a red glowing thing, about an 18-inch circle, she said. It lit the whole side of the mountain up like broad daylight. In the months to follow, the Shermans saw myriad lights and flying objects, including more than a dozen on one evening. Sightings generally occur during the new moon and often when the sky is overcast or stormy. Their most recent encounter took place in May during a thunderstorm. Terry and his son believe they may have communicated with one of the craft. As they traveled west on the ranch road one evening, they saw a lighted object duck between a rock ridge as if to avoid them. Moments later, they managed to sneak up on the object. Before it could hide again, they stood and waved their arms at it. The light flashed on and off 3 times as if signaling them, and then disappeared. Soon after sightings began, the Shermans found one of their cows dead in a field. It had a peculiar hole in the center of its left eyeball, but was otherwise untouched with no trace of blood. There was no evidence of predators, footprints, or tire tracks. A strange chemical-like odor was present. Later, another dead cow was found with a similar hole in its left eye and a 6-inch hole only about an inch deep carved out of its rectum. The same chemical smell was noticeable again. Cow mutilations have been reported across the United States since the 1960s, particularly in western states. In classic mutilation cases, the anus is cored out and the cow's udders and genitalia are removed, all with laser-like precision and no visible signs of blood. The Shermans, who keep close watch on their cattle, believe they may have interrupted the mutilations before they were able to finish. Then, the cows began disappearing altogether. We about rode the saddle horses to death looking for cattle until we realized they were vanishing, Terry said. One appeared to be lifted from the snow where it stood. The Shermans saw the cow's hoofprints lead into the field, but the prints stopped at the edge of the field near some trees. The area where the cow apparently took its last steps was surrounded by a circle of broken twigs and branches. Above, Terry noticed the tops of the trees appeared to have been cut off. If it's snow, it's hard for a 1,200 or 1,400-pound animal just to walk off without leaving tracks or to stop and walk backwards completely as if it never missed its tracks, Terry said. It was just gone. It was very bizarre. The last of the 3 dead cows was found in January in a clump of trees at the edge of the same field. The cow, which had been seen alive by the Sherman son just 5 minutes earlier, had a 6-inch wide, 18-inch deep hole cored out of its rectum and extending into the body cavity. There was no blood on the cow or the snow, and the same chemical odor was apparent. There was a circle of twigs around the fallen cow, and the top of the trees appeared severed. The cattle deaths and disappearances have been very troubling, both psychologically and financially. Even while the Shermans wonder if they can believe what they're seeing, their bank account has taken a hit. The mutilators didn't just take any cows. They took the best ones, Terry said. I've got a neighbor over here who's reluctant to talk about it, but he told me that they've had trouble since he was a small kid, and he's probably 55, Terry said. He told me, people will think you're crazy, but you're not. If you are, then we both have the same problem. The Shermans may never know the cause or reason for what they've experienced, but they know one thing. They just want it to stop. Now, one thing to keep in mind is this article was published nearly 20 years ago, and I'll include the entire article in the show notes, of course, but this kind of lends some perspective on that specific area, and I have been trying for the last 1.5 to 2 years to get myself out there to the ranch, based on some personal accounts from people that I've gotten to know over the last little while. And there's some incredible stuff going on down there. And after a little bit more research, I really want to go down and investigate myself. So that's kind of going to be the plan. And this summer, I'd like to get together a small crew of legitimately interested individuals. And so this is kind of a call to action. So if anybody out there, whether you're from Utah or not, if you would like to participate in a Skinwalker Ranch adventure, so to speak, please feel free to email us and we'll throw something together, and we really will. It'll be a small group of people, a selective bunch, but I would like to get a group out there to experience some of this for ourselves. Being so close, I feel like we definitely are doing ourselves a disservice and not getting out there. So if you would like to be a part of the Skinwalker Ranch trip expedition this summer, send an email to info@oddrealityradio.com and tell me why you'd like to be a part. For anyone else that just wants to hear the rest of it, we definitely will be keeping up with this, and I'd like to do what I can to get out and possibly get some decent footage. We've got some decent camera gear and stuff that I want to get out and use, especially in an area like the Skinwalker Ranch. Now, as for the Sherman family, by mid-1996, they had had enough. They were sleeping together on the floor of their living room for protection. They had no idea how to respond to an intelligent force that seems to know what they're thinking and what they're saying. So they go public, and they begin to look for help. And a high-powered science team comprising the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, with the unlimited funds and access to world-class technology, responds. They're based in Las Vegas and funded by billionaire entrepreneur and aerospace owner Robert Bigelow. NIDS purchases the property and the family moves away. NIDS decides to create a laboratory of the paranormal and sets up a command and control center on the ranch. 3 scientists, led by Colm Keller, Ph.D., and an arsenal of scientific equipment including a magnetic field detector, an electric field detector, instruments for monitoring radiation, microwave, and radio waves, as well as portable spectrometers and multiple video cameras, are quickly deployed on the ranch. Throughout 1996 and 1997, as the team spends hundreds of days on the property, and as they cover every inch of the ranch, mostly at night, they encounter dozens of strange phenomena. On March 10, 1997, the team gets a phone call from the panicked ranch manager to report an 84-pound calf has been silently killed in the daylight while he and his wife were only 300 yards away. The team hops on a private jet and in 5 hours is standing over the dead calf. The animal, with all internal organs gone, ribcage ripped open, lies spread eagle on the pasture. The calf's limbs have been forcibly ripped from their ball and socket joints. An ear is gone. Using forensic analysis, and with veterinary pathologists conducting a necropsy, the team quickly determines that sharp instruments have been used to remove the ear. Additional forensic analysis determines that a heavy machete instrument was also used. Not a drop of blood was found on or near the calf. The ranch manager, needless to say, is completely spooked. 2 days later, at near midnight, the dogs go berserk outside. The team and the ranch manager hop into a truck and drive through the pasture where the cattle are plainly panicked. The bouncing headlight beams pick up 2 steering eyes from a tree, obviously a large animal. Another large shadow is seen by team members below the tree. The manager, an expert marksman, shoots the creature from the tree and sees it drop to the ground from the rifle scope. According to team lead Keller, quote, "We jump out of the truck and run over to the spot. The manager yells that he sees another large creature, shoots twice, and plunges into the undergrowth. We run through the dense shrubs and trees, expecting a wounded creature to attack. We spot some weird tracks in the snow, and it looks like a large raptor with claws. We spend hours hunting for other evidence or bodies, and none are found." In April 1997, something invisible drove through a herd of cows and panicked them, scattering them in multiple directions. Simultaneously, the needle of a compass locked onto whatever was amongst the cattle and stayed locked for 9 minutes. In June of 1997, the team witnessed from 75 feet a basketball-sized orb that silently hovered in front of us for several seconds. Minutes later, one of the team witnessed a huge shadowy object in the infrared, but the object was invisible to the human eye. At 2 a.m. in August 1997, again seen with the benefit of infrared technology, a 6-foot-tall, black, heavily muscled humanoid crawled through some kind of, quote, door about 4 feet above the ground and vanished into the night. Another observer only saw a weird light without the benefit of infrared technology. A couple of days previously, cattle were attacked by a number of small red orbs causing multiple injuries, 1 death, and 1 abortion. Over the years, the team personally experienced and documented a large array of weird phenomena, including unidentified flying objects, bizarre creatures, flying orbs, spikes in the magnetic fields, infrared activity, and much more. Because the events were so fleeting and rarely repeated, no definitive explanations were ever proven for what took place. And once again, the book they're referring to here is The Hunt for the Skinwalker by Colm Kelleher and George Knapp, who, for those of you who don't know, George Knapp is the gentleman who actually interviewed a man by the name of Bob Lazar in the late 1980s about a little airbase known as Area 51, and its involvement in experiments with interaction with extraterrestrials and their technology. And coincidentally, over the last weekend in Phoenix, Arizona, the 2015 International UFO Congress was held, and Bob Lazar and George Knapp sat down for another historic interview, I'm sure. And I haven't seen or heard it, but a friend and former guest on Odd Reality Radio, Ryan Sprague, was there and has agreed to come back on the show to discuss his trip to the International UFO Congress and how his book, When Logic Fails, is coming along as well. So until next time, if you need to get in touch, once again the email is info@oddrealityradio.com. I'm Ty West. Take care.